Hello, and thank you for watching 24 Plus. I'm ABC24 anchor Pepper Baker. Tennesseans will vote for a new governor in November, but before that, they will decide on the Democrat and Republican nominees on August 6th. State primary. So we are profiling top candidates to help you make an informed decision at the polls. So today we welcome State Representative Monty Fritts, a Republican candidate running to be Tennessee's next governor. Thank you so much for being here.
Pepper, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Of course, I appreciate yours because I know you guys are really busy these days.
Yes.
So I know, first off, I know you were in Millington last night. Just want to ask how that event went.
It was great. Good turnout of folks. We were in an antique store. So Denise and I, my wife of 42 years, and I could have spent some portion of that 42 years going through the antique mall. It was huge. It was warm. It was much cooler when we left East Tennessee yesterday, but it was great. I think an energetic event.
Okay, good. I know Senator Blackburn made a stop in Millington before she came on here. So I just wanted to ask, what goes into you all's decision making on where you stop? Why not, Orange Mound or Fraser or Whitehaven or downtown Memphis? Why Millington all the time?
Well, I've been to Orange Mound. We've spent a little time there. As a matter of fact, we probably will be back in that area this afternoon. I've got to deliver some hats. I've got a friend who does God's work down at the Warrior Center.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I don't think Anthony's there, but I'm going to leave a few ball caps for folks. He lives down the street from there. We've knocked doors off Sim Street, have some good relationships there, and so I go wherever I'm asked first, and we'll seek out interviews sometimes, but and I'm not sure how this one happened. I appreciate it. I don't know if someone of my volunteers.
I reached out to your team.
Well, thank you.
I did.
Thank you so much. So a lot of that, we get lots of requests for podcasts. We've gotten lots over the last 2 weeks as the other two candidates have started to fade. We've gotten lots of opportunities to be on television, on radio, so we're thankful for that.
Yeah, you seem very open and willing, which is good.
Yes, ma'am.
Why now, though? Why is now the time for you to run for Tennessee governor?
Well, it was probably never upon my decision to run. I was happy to get out of politics. I had been a state rep for 4 years. I've term limited myself to 2 terms. I see what long-term duration does to politicians. It corrupts them. They forget who they work for, I think, in many cases. They start to take money from everybody and their brother. And I didn't want to be that. And so I just kind of felt that nudge, I think, of the Lord. There was a burden on my heart, that old church term of feeling a burden. I think Tennessee's headed the wrong way in some directions. Best place in the world to live. I think God loves from the West Coast to the Smokies, West Coast of Tennessee. I think He loves our state and has blessed it tremendously, but our budgets are growing like crazy. We're practicing lots of corporate welfare. I think there are lots of Tennesseans that feel like nobody in Nashville is working for them. And I think we've got to turn that around. So I'm the old guy that's trying to turn that around some for y'all's generation, I think, because the voter confidence and confidence in government is as low as I have ever seen it. And that's frightening to me.
Wow. So I've heard your campaign be kind of coined grassroots. So can you confirm you're not taking PAC money or large?
We've taken 2 PAC checks. I took a check from the Tennessee Farm Association. I took one from a Liberty group in Knoxville, $6,000–7,000. But as far as like the big pharmaceutical companies, some of these out-of-state PACs, I don't think we should have out-of-state money coming into Tennessee to affect our elections. I think that campaigning in Mississippi and Georgia is unacceptable when you're running to be governor of the state of Tennessee. We didn't take any PAC money as a state rep. Denise and I have been blessed, so we could run for that office and just on a small amount of donations. We're really fiscally responsible, where I think that the other 2 Republican campaigns have probably spent a combined total of about $25 million at this point. Isn't that a shocker?
Yeah.
Yeah, they want it too bad. We've spent about $350,000.
Oh, wow.
And I think we have a legitimate shot at winning.
Okay.
I think effort overcomes talent. It overcomes funding. So we've definitely put more effort into it. And we have a message that is much different than those canned bullet point talking points that some paid campaign manager gives the candidate. We try to engage. You asked about Millington last night. We had to leave a little bit early, but we try to stay as long as there's a question to be resolved. Now, last night I'd gotten up really early, and I had a 4 o'clock wake up today to do Awaken Me here in town. And we didn't stay, and I guess we left about 9:30 or something like that. But,
okay. But you were there for a couple of hours,
oh, yes,
from my
ma'am.
understanding,
Yes,
so
yes, ma'am.
a good amount of time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the issues that you are running on. I want to talk first about statewide, that appeals to all Tennesseans,
Yes.
and then the ones that are specific to Shelby County and
Yes,
West Tennesseans.
Yes. First, leave more money in your pockets, in your purse, in my wallet, in Shelby County, in Roane County. Let's start that by getting rid of this ridiculous 4% state grocery sales tax. I've tried in both the 113th and 114th General Assembly to remove that or start removing that. We took about a quarter of it on each time, and we wanted to leave that in the pockets of Tennesseans. I want to get rid of the entire, it's an estimate of about $880 million in revenue.
Wow.
And whether we do that in 2 attempts or 3 attempts to get it down to 0, I think it's the right thing to do for all Tennesseans. I think from the elderly who are struggling with medicine and food to the young person who just wants to be able to go catch a movie or whatever, it impacts everybody the same. And that's the way we ought to do things for all Tennesseans, not just for the special interests, not just for the, those that are politically connected. We've been practicing corporate welfare in Tennessee. Not a fan of that. I think our Constitution doesn't allow that. I think that rather than expending $30 million to recruit a Starbucks or sending our money to Oracle or to Ford or to the Smokies in my end of the state, the Titans, I think we should have been investing those dollars in infrastructure where all Tennesseans benefit from it. And it still becomes a recruitment tool for industry and for business, because you've got to have water lines that will support and electrical infrastructure and all those sorts of things that I think can fall within the scope of the Constitution. But to just offer those incentives or direct to the companies is the wrong thing to do. Lastly, I would say on the finance part of it, leaving that 4 cents on the grocery sales tax in Shelby County or Roane County pulls a little bit of power away from Nashville. Our founders weren't big fans of centralized power. And mankind has a proclivity to want to do that. And so I think pulling some of that fuel back from the overreach in Nashville is a good thing to do. I attempted last year to reform property tax. Property tax is a big thing for Shelby County and Roane County. Probably hits y'all a little bit harder. But we're being taxed against unrealized capital gains now. Because every 4 to 5 years you get a reassessment, someone assigns a value to your home. That impacts not only the homeowner, but it impacts the renter or the leaser, because it's passed on to the renter and the leaser. And I think in this affordability crisis that I think we've been dragged into for maybe the last 8 years, 7, 8 years, I think that many young people are having a hard time moving out because housing prices have gone crazy. Tennessee's a great place to live, but government can help by dropping some of that tax burden. And lastly, on the property tax reform, I think it's immoral that we would evict a Tennessean from their home because they're delinquent in property taxes. And so I want to fix that. I think in God's economy of right and wrong, that doesn't pass muster. So I think we need to fix that.
Shelby Countyans the government here just approved a 2% or a 2-cent tax increase, property tax increase. So I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people, your message there. How would you make up as far as trying to eliminate the grocery tax? Where else would that money come from?
Well, I think if you take it at a measured approach, whether you start at a third or a fourth or a half of that and leave it in the pockets. The bill that I offered just took what was currently on the WIC approved list and took those grocery sales taxes off everybody. And so the grocers didn't have to reprogram anything greatly. They're already set up for that. Everybody benefits from those basic food groups. And I think that's certainly one approach. It's probably the way I would prefer to do that, one step at a time. But by the end of 4 years, I'd like to have us out of that. I don't think there's a necessity for a makeup if we budget correctly. I will be honest with you, I think that we have many contracts that are poorly managed in state government. I think that we are spending lots of money not very efficiently. And I think that as we look at those and look at, again, some of that corporate welfare that we've dispensed, I think that becomes a break even rather easily.
Okay. You know, one thing that I like to note is the fact that when I said, you know, what issues are specific to Shelby County, and you know, I did ask about all Tennessee, but you didn't result to crime right off the bat. And that's unique, a unique point there. Now, your campaign has a pretty cool slogan, liberty and less government.
Yes,
and then don't DC my Tennessee.
Yes.
Very, very catchy.
Both the other campaigns and half the congressional groups have tried to emulate those to some extent. There's a let's keep Tennessee, Tennessee, let's Tennessee, DC. See, I go to all these, you know, $100, $500 a plate rubber chicken dinners that we have to do, foolish things. And I hear that. But I think the liberty and less government, that is a message that's really congruent with our founders' thought. Right? That our rights come from God. That mankind, again, has a proclivity to want to assume that He is the dispenser of our rights. And any time that we allow government in any form to reach that thought level, it's hard on the average citizen. And their voice is diminished, and the burden falls on their shoulders the most. And so I think ideally, we've never gotten that perfect, right? In America, we've never gotten that perfect. I think we have the best of ideals. I think that our Declaration of Independence, that one sentence, all of it, but that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, and that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We forget this next part in government, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So I think that's the greatest one run-on sentence ever written outside Scripture, I think. And I think that anchors our Constitution. It anchors those ideals that we aspire to be. In our preamble, where we say that in order to form a more perfect union, I think that was 1780s talk for continuous improvement. And so I think that it's good for us to practice iron sharpens iron. We've got to dispel with this, you know, squabbling between parties and squabbling within the party. Sometimes my opinions aren't welcome within the Republican Party, right? And rather than just talk about it, there's a tendency to just want to cancel culture that person. We do that between parties. Let's stop that. If I'm confident in what I believe, we can think completely polar opposite on a matter and still walk away from the conversation viewing one another as image bearers of Almighty God, and still love one another as fellow citizens. We might both learn something, and even if neither of us change our mind, aren't we countrymen? And can't we behave better than what we've allowed ourselves to behave? I think there's a great need for that.
Okay, profound. Liberty and less government. There is a lot we're seeing in Shelby County where the state, the federal government, seems to have a focus in their hands in a lot of things, from education to crime, economic development as well. So I did want to kind of touch on some of the major things that Governor Bill Lee had a huge hand in that will then fall under the next governor's leadership, if that be you. So education, I'm sure you're probably aware of this 9-member state-appointed oversight board that came in to basically oversee the Memphis-Shelby County School District, the largest school district in the state. Do you believe that that was the right move? Reluctantly,
yes. And I think many of us were reluctantly yes on that, because many of us who are constitutionalists and push away from the centralized government don't want to see those types of things happen, when it's estimated that 1 out of 7 education dollars spent in the state of Tennessee are spent in Shelby County, right? And the comptroller's report was not very kind to how those dollars had been spent. And you can debate some of the figures some, but I mean, at a minimum, gross mismanagement, I think. And so I think it's necessary. I think what is also important, though, and I sometimes fail to see in Governor Lee's administration, is an exit strategy where that is restored back to the people, not just of Shelby County or Memphis, but anywhere. There seems to be a tendency to want to retract the rights from the individual, bring it to Nashville, and hold it forever. I am not on board with that. I think just as lots of people applaud and talk about all the things they did to bring crime down in Memphis when most of them really are liars and they didn't have anything to do with it, many of the politicians, just to be honest. I think that there has to be an exit strategy for that as well. I think that it is not a solution to forever keep National Guardsmen in Memphis, Tennessee. It is not. That is a problem, as a matter of fact, to do that forever. Article 3, Section 5 of our Tennessee Constitution talks about rebellions and invasions. And Article 3 is the power of the governor. And so the governor has had authority for some time to be able to send in the guard or the militia to be able to help. And certainly if there is a criminal rebellion, many of those doors I've knocked on down off Sim Street, many of them were older ladies. And the first things that they mentioned were crime, having things stolen from them, and often petty crime, dangerous conditions sometimes. Schools, they did mention schools. And corruption. And these weren't my questions. These were the dear ladies who answered the doors. And so I think under Article 3, Section 5, the governor has the authority to help. Now that part of our Constitution says the governor has that authority if the General Assembly shall declare by law. So the General Assembly has to act, right, to be constitutional. I think that's important. I think every time that we find ourselves kind of skirting outside that contract that we, the people, have given those in elected office and the power that we've given them, it becomes a slippery slope to a bad place. And so to be honest with you, I've been skeptical of the whole, this was a plan that we'd had in place in Nashville for a long time. I don't think it was. I think this was a plan that came from D.C. and we saluted and did it. And you can argue how bad that is, if that's wrong, if that's not, If we've helped the lives of the people in Memphis some, there's some good that's come out of that, right? But I do think that we need someone at the helm in Nashville who is okay with being a leader rather than a follower. I don't think we've had that, just to be candid.
So would you prioritize a timeline where
Yes, ma'am.
People can get a date of when the National
Yes,
Guard?
ma'am. And that ought to be worked with the sheriff, with the county mayor, the councils, the communities. This should be an ongoing series of meetings between state leadership and the folks here in the community, those elected and appointed and those who just live here, the people with the real power that just live here. And how do we work to what that solution set is? I think if we had those meetings a lot, maybe they're happening and I just don't know about them. But if we were having those types of meetings, I think there would be revelations forthcoming as to some of the areas that we need to improve that might even be more important than what we're doing now. And I think it's an interesting thing. If you'll ask the question and listen to what people will tell you, they'll give you answers. I think we need to do more of that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Memphis Safe Task Force helped cut crime down, although there were trends showing that it was already trending that way, or data showing that it was already trending that way. One of the other parts about the Memphis Safe Task Force was whether or not the National Guardsmen were going to be armed. And that's played a really big part in one of the 4 deaths that we've seen over the last couple of months that happened in downtown Memphis, where a gentleman was shot and killed by a National Guardsman. There's, a little bit of obscurity around whether or not that man was armed, if he pointed at officers. It hasn't been ruled of whether or not it's justified. But a lot of people brought back the question of, when did the National Guardsmen, when was it decided that they were going to be armed? Because there was this whole kind of confusion as to they weren't going to be armed, and then at some point the decision was made. I know you are a Second Amendment supporter, and I saw that you voted for teachers to be armed after the Nashville school shooting. So,
those that wanted to be.
Those that wanted to be.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the clarification. So what do you think about just that? Was it the right decision to make National Guardsmen armed?
I think we were going to send them unarmed to start with. I objected to that, to be honest with you, because on the premise of, if we need guardsmen unarmed, then do we need guardsmen? Right? Is
Presence, I thought, was kind of we just having their presence there, not armed, would help. was what the understanding was.
Yeah, perhaps. I think to get to that Article 3, Section 5, I think if you do have what we've termed as a criminal rebellion or a rebellion of crime in some areas, then I think it's a necessity to do that. I think that we have, for a long time, perpetuated in Tennessee an inclination not to go armed to the average citizen, right? And I think that leans toward a bias of favor toward the predatory criminal. Because it's like a pasture of sheep with no sheepdog. The coyote feels free will. And I think that happens sometimes. I think we've allowed that to happen in many of our cities and other parts, not just cities, even some of the rural areas in Tennessee. And I think that's foundational to turning this around, is that the criminal doesn't think that the other citizens are prey. You never want to have, I'm a combat veteran. You never want to have to discharge a firearm. It'd be easier not to even carry one. But there is a presence with that changes the attitudes and minds, I think. So, yeah, I was an advocate for the Guard being armed. I know for a fact that they were initially, the plan was to send them down unarmed, and that created some concerns for lots of people. I think one of the things that we missed too, I spoke with a couple National Guardsmen over yesterday and today that were down, and they're really enjoying what they're doing to some extent. But those who have a civilian career, it's being impacted by this, because in most cases our guardsmen aren't full-time guardsmen.
Right.
And in most cases, they either work for a store, a company, or something, and they're put perhaps at a disadvantage on promotions and things later. And I think oftentimes those non-veteran personnel that make those decisions don't consider that. I think one of the big things that we often miss, we have elected office holders who've never served. They don't understand the impact on the family nor the service member and things that we ask them to do. And so what a regretful thing that happened, with that shooting. But even aside from that, if that never happened, there's still a cost on community and on the guardsmen who are down here. So I think we have to be very deliberate when we make those decisions, and it requires an exit plan.
Okay, so Shelby Countyans can, if a vote for you, or Memphians, I should say, because this is the Memphis Safe Task Force, will get a deadline if you were to be governor.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And that deadline will start with community conversations, of which I'll be a direct part of with those people, because I think the governor needs to hear that directly.
Wow. One more point about education. I noticed, which was also surprising to me, that you voted against private school vouchers.
Why was that surprising to you?
Because most Republicans were for it, and you were
goodness,
one of the very
stereotyping.
I don't mean to, but it was Governor Bill Lee is really a big proponent of these private school vouchers. Yeah. A lot of other Republicans around the state came to echo that. So
many of them were coerced.
Well, I can't speak to that, but
let me just tell you what I think my opinion is on that. So first, unconstitutional in my opinion. Article 11, Section 12 of the Tennessee Constitution has 3 sentences. First sentence says we recognize the inherent value of education. We all recognize that, right? The second sentence is a specific and directive statement, and it's a shall statement. It says the General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards for a system of free public schools. Mm-hmm. I think that's specific and restrictive enough that we can't use public funds for private schools. Now, if you have children, or if I have little children, my sons are grown, they're 39 and 40, but God gives us the right, as a matter of fact, the calling, the responsibility to train up a child in the way he should go. And that's not just in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, but it is also in how to read and how to write, how to discern things. That's part of our education process. How to stretch 12-2 wire, how to pour concrete. All those things I think become important. So I think the parents are already free. One of the things I found offensive about some of the statements that come from Governor Lee's cabinet and from him were first demeaning all public school teachers. They'll never be forgiven for that. They've so hurt the feelings of most public school teachers. And I mean that in a sincere way. They'll never recover from that. And just perhaps a disingenuous approach that we went from vouchers to now we're going to call them scholarships. I was in the meeting where that was first announced, so I know that's the case. And aside from the constitutionality of it, that was a no for me. That's all I needed. I try to read my Constitution and be fluent in it, and so I just couldn't vote for them. But in my district, in many of the rural districts, it was an 80-20 at least opposed to these vouchers.
So would you eliminate, expand,
Yes.
or reform the program?
My plan is to eliminate the program. That's going to create some consternation with 35,000 families now. I'm going to need to probably borrow someone else's white Dodge truck to drive because someone's going to want to egg mine. But if it were unconstitutional to vote for it, how could I perpetuate it? I had this discussion with a person and good people are going to disagree on some of these things, but he said, well, you can't just do this. The reporter that I was talking to, he said, you can't do that. It's already the law. I said, laws that are outside the bounds of the Constitution are repugnant and not laws at all. That's what Jefferson said. And so I think we have to take that approach. We each take the oath to be a representative of the people. And so as the people's representative, as a governor, if that be the case, I'll have to do that. I do think that along those same lines, some of the complaints that people have about our public school systems, I think we have to deal with those. I think that we have allowed ourselves to maybe become disconnected some. I don't think our last two choices for Commissioner of Education, first, they weren't competent in the classroom. We know that. At least Ms. Lizette wasn't, by her own admission. And it's hard for me to understand how someone who doesn't demonstrate competency in one of the related areas of a department you're going to lead can effectively lead that organization. And I think lots of people in Tennessee ask that question. So we need to make some changes there. I think we overuse standardized testing. I had a fourth grade teacher tell me just recently that he spent 60 or part of 60 days preparing for, administering, and then reviewing standardized testing. So think of all the curriculum think of all the curriculum, if that's anywhere close, all the subject matter that we couldn't cover. There are so many standards on Tennessee history and on a U.S. history, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, what happened with World War II, that we have diminished those to sometimes one talking point, and we're expending time in teaching to a test. I think we can do better than that.
Okay, for the interest of time, we got to keep moving. Data centers. So there's hesitancy with placing data centers across the state now, but the conversation in Shelby County and Southwest Memphis more so is more towards regulation, since Elon Musk's XAI already exists and it's pretty much seemingly staying put. So for the people here, how can you use your governorship to really regulate data centers' usage on city resources and pollution, and hearing out any of the residents here's health concerns?
Yeah, I have four big concerns with artificial intelligence and the hyperscale data centers. And it's a question we've been asking for the last year and a half of both Stuart McWhorter and Ms. Flora Tidings. Those are the two particular persons I have asked this question. Is AI, and then by connection, these hyperscale data centers, is it happening to Tennesseans or for Tennesseans? I think that's a fundamentally sound question to ask.
Is.
And I think that it might be that I have the ability to design a shovel, and you might have the ability to design a backhoe with hydraulics and diesel and all that kind of stuff, right? We're both in the hole digging business. You're going to be much more effective at it than I am with a shovel, right, in most cases. And God's given us both the ability to do that. But if we ever allow that design of anything to become something that we serve, that's problematic. And so electrical usage is a real concern for me. 1 out of 4 kilowatts that we use in Tennessee, 2-year-old data, but 1 out of 4 kilowatts come from outside the state of Tennessee. Either Southern Power, Duke Power, or our TVA facilities in Alabama. So it's some mix of those. But every time that we buy a kilowatt off the kilowatt economy, that rate is passed on to the residential and commercial user, right? And so that's important.
Right.
It's part of the cost of ownership, right? And so I think Congress has failed us miserably there. They have not dealt with the debt structure of TVA to bring on a Watts Bar 3 or a Sequoia 3 or whatever. You know, I have a nuclear background. And most of mine is in weapons work or naval reactors, but I understand that supply chain. And so when I hear politicians talk about things in the nuclear field and they act as if we'll have this solved in 4 or 5 years or 6 years, they have no clue. We need additional domestic fuel sources to be able to fuel the next generations of those small modular reactors. The whole authorization basis is going to be a deal. And when we plant something a little bigger than your studio to generate lots of kilowatts in a neighborhood in Memphis, we better know that we've got our AB correct so that we've evaluated all the postulated threats. But back to the data centers, the increased demand on electricity, even if we mitigate that with the companies bring it in themselves, what this governor will do is no dollars spent to recruit them here, because I don't see the collective benefit for all Tennesseans for that. I hear people's, you know, we've got to stay ahead of the Chinese. Okay. Some of those same people make fortune cookie commercials. I think that if that is a real threat, okay, doesn't mean we have to solve it on Tennessee soil. As a Tennessee first person, I think we have to make decisions that's good for this soil, from the Mississippi River to the Smoky Mountains. And with the whole concept of artificial intelligence and hyperscale data centers, we could locate those in Kentucky or Ohio and benefit just the same. They don't provide a lot of long-term jobs. It's only in the construction side. The water impact, whether it's quantity or quality, is a concern for me. When the Tennessee River watershed, 70% of it last month was in a severe drought condition. When the Duck River, we're struggling to find water to put in the Duck River so that it will fuel the growth around Columbia and Murray County. Those are real issues. The field generated by these systems. I know that Senator Blackburn was concerned about the zoo in Nashville. I'm concerned about the elephants too. Heck, I'm a Republican. But I'm more concerned about my kids, our cattle, our crops. Let's understand those things. I'm okay with some of the other states being the scientific labs that we solve some of those problems before we so pull them in Tennessee.
Okay. Moving on, death penalty. I don't know if you've heard about the Tony Carruthers case. He's a death row inmate in Tennessee, but he was from Memphis and convicted of murder in Memphis. Governor Lee granted a reprieve after his botched execution, and now he's getting pushback from a lot of medical experts wanting to halt executions until the process can be vetted better or just researched and improved. So are you pro-death penalty?
So I think it's an abhorrent thing to be pro-death penalty, to take a life. I think that consequences must be commensurate with the crime. So do I think that there is a use for capital punishment? Yes, ma'am. Do I think that executing that sentence 30 years after the victim or victim's family is set in a courtroom and watch that verdict be shared is justice? No, it's not. I think that we need several areas of reform on what I would call both ends of the justice spectrum in Tennessee. I think there are many hideous crimes that occur that perhaps should be worthy of capital punishment. We drafted legislation this year that human trafficking, whether for sex traffic or for labor, should in some circumstances merit capital punishment. I don't think slavery is okay, and that's what that is. I think for rape, aggravated rape, whether the victim is 7, 17, or 70. You know, we did this thing a couple years ago for under 12 victims. But I don't care if the victim's 7, 17, or 70. That aggravated rapist has taken something that can't be restored. I think there should be, by the process of Tennessee law, an opportunity to consider them for capital punishment. I do. Those are egregious crimes. They're assaults on the sanctity of life in both cases. On the other end of the spectrum, not a fan of private penitentiaries. I think that just as it would be immoral to issue traffic fines, speeding fines, just to raise revenue, or capital punishment just to take life, it's equally immoral to incarcerate people for profit. And I think it drives the wrong behavior. We have about 6,000 inmates in private penitentiaries. This is hugely unpopular with some groups when I say this because there's lots of my colleagues that accept money from CoreCivic. I think that's one of those responsibilities the state has that shouldn't be shirked off to a contract. And there's not a quick answer to it. With 6,000 inmates, you can't just make that go away overnight. But I think some of the behaviors that could be assumed to be driven for that are the incarceration of people for much more minor crimes. So I think when you look at that spectrum, I think on the top end, some of those assaults on the sanctity of life, I think that we, in God's economy of justice, we should deal with them much more quickly and much more severely. I think for some of those more minor type crimes, especially for the first-time nonviolent offender, to take that person's voting rights and firearms rights and make them a second-class citizen for the rest of their life because of one conviction for a nonviolent crime, we're going the wrong way with that.
So would you review Tony Carruthers' case? Because there's calls for more DNA testing that could potentially, or people are saying that could, make him prove that he wasn't there, or it could just give more information in the case. Would you review that, or would you plan to carry out Governor Lee's new date? Yeah,
I would plan to carry out the sentence. Let the system work the way it has, because we put lots of time and lots of money into the review in the courts for those appeals.
Okay.
But I would plan to carry it. I think postponing the sentence for that period of time was a bad decision. I think there's, it's going to sound indicting, but I'll say it. If you talk to anyone that works in the Department of Corrections, we aren't doing very well in that department. There are several in the state of Tennessee that I think are getting a D or an F. And they're all of the failures that we've had. We had a correctional officer murdered at Morgan County Regional Facility in February. And some of the communications that went out to the family from related people, not just TDOC, but from other folks in law enforcement, were unacceptable to the widow. And so I think we've got some real work to do there. And a couple other departments I think are probably, top of my list, but our goal should be in the incarceration to provide a facility, an atmosphere that is safe for the staff, for the inmate, that trafficking and drugs are not accepted, and that to the point that it's humanly possible, those men and women that serve time leave better than they come in. Okay. I think that sounds like a high goal or an idea, but shouldn't that be the goal, an idea? Shouldn't we want that person to come out? And I think we do okay in some of those areas now, but I think there's much more work to be done there.
Okay, we are nearing a little bit of overtime now, so I'm going to have two lasting questions. We're going to play a quick clip from your opponents on the Republican side, Senator Marsha Blackburn and Representative John Rose, about debates. Okay.
The Republicans that are in the race, we have done lots of forums from one end of the state to the other.
It is not a correct statement. We have not had a single forum that she's been a part of. There's been one. It happened this past Friday night in Knoxville, Tennessee. The East Tennessee Young Republicans hosted it, and I was happy to participate in that forum with the other candidate in this race. And so that's just a gross misrepresentation.
I did hear a little bit of what your response to this in another interview earlier today. So who is telling the truth here? Like, is somebody not trying to do debates? Have you all been on the stage together? And would you like to do one?
Absolutely. We've been calling for a debate, I think, not because it's me, the other candidate, as John referred there. The forum that we had for the East Tennessee Young Republicans was supposed to be a debate. And it was his input from his campaign that they said, well, we can't be on the stage together at the same time. So this whole awkward that we'd ask a question and go back and forth, and I'm not sure what that's all about, but it was polite, it was straightforward. He messed a couple of questions up horribly because he was so nervous. But I've used this phrase from some time, and whichever one it fits, one of them's scared and the other one's glad of it. And I think the glad of it's probably, John, we have not been in forums across the state. There's not a time that we've all been answering questions at the same time that I can remember. There's probably 5 times that we've been in the same room together. Senator Blackburn hasn't been to a lot of the areas, the rural counties. She doesn't show up. And so we were supposed to do, Channel 5 in Nashville was going to do a statewide televised debate. We agreed immediately. Congressman Rose agreed and put out the anywhere, anytime statement. And then within an hour, he backs out of it. I think, I said this earlier today, is probably what you're referring to. I think he's going to look back, that's the moment he blew the whole race, because the collective energy for all the young people, when they saw the weakness of that, they just dropped their head. I think Tennesseans are concerned. I take on some really, I answer every question, and some of my answers probably scare some people to death. I get that. But you never have to wonder what I'm thinking. And with both the other candidates, outside bullet points, you don't know what they're thinking. And if they're unwilling to debate in front of a crowd and take questions from a fishbowl or people who raise their hands or whatever, what happens when that crisis or urgency hits Nashville and that the governor has to act? John won't be able to hide behind Marcia's unwillingness to debate. I just think it's a real concern for most Tennesseans.
And just wrapping up the interview here, I think a lot of people, since the debate situation is still up in the air, and hopefully if you win the primary, you'll want to do one with the Democratic opponent.
Absolutely.
But,
and independents.
And independents,
yes.
Right. You're right, and independents. So what makes you different? And I know we've been through a lot with all the questioning, so hopefully people got a good grasp of what does make you different. But how, if you were to summarize exactly what makes you different from Senator Blackburn to Representative John Rose, what would it be?
I'll bring a working class mentality to this job, even though I've had experience in managing large, very complex organizations and hundreds upon hundreds of people leading them. Led combat operations as an NCO IC for a PSD and convoy security team. Manage hundreds of millions of dollars in budgets annually. I think it's that working class, blue collar ability to work together with folks and come up with solutions. Be a little hard-headed sometimes. I think that's a good thing. I think I bring that. I'm that person that doesn't take money from everybody. Folks that contribute to these organizations and these PACs, I support their right to do that, but I've got to tell you, some of these PACs are silencing the average Tennessean's voice. Because just look at your mailbox, the mailers that are coming in, glossies, 8.5 by 11, some of them are 4 pages long where they're just bashing the other candidate. Why not sit down at a table and Ms. Pepper asks the questions and we respond? I think that'd be a cool thing to do. I would go ahead and challenge. I think Memphis, Tennessee would be the perfect place to do the debate. You'd be the perfect person to do that. So I will challenge Senator Blackburn and Congressman Rose. Come on, do what the people of Tennessee want you and expect you to do. Allow this young lady to do a debate. Let's see what that does for your channel. I think it'd be well watched. I'm not a career DC politicians person. I'm definitely not going to be that establishment person that just feels like he's got to go along with what the party tells me to do. I am an unapologetic Republican. But I'll unapologetically argue with people in my own party too about the right thing to do. I've demonstrated that. Unfortunately, I've been a couple of times where I'm the only yes or only no vote on the board in Nashville. I'm okay with that. I have stood up for Tennesseans' rights to keep and bear arms successfully. I've stood up against this crazy geoengineering stuff. I've stood up against budget growth. While both of those other candidates have complied with $39.5 trillion in debt that is exacerbating the affordability crisis, I've had the guts to say these 4 or 5 things in the budget create great problems for me. I'm not voting for it. I think we need that.
Now, the other two are pretty big on supporting President Donald Trump. They've put that in their campaign ads. Are you as closely in the president's camp, or how would you describe yourself?
I'm a Tennessee first. I'm in the Tennesseans camp. I voted for President Trump 3 times, but you won't hear me pandering and ring kissing just to try to get a vote. I think it sickens people. I think sometimes these politicians superimpose a photograph of President Trump in with their baby pictures just to earn. You know it's true.
That's funny.
And so, you know, in Trump 45, I worked in his administration. So I had the Office of Stockpile Production Integration in NSA, and I was a federal program manager for material recovery and recycle for plutonium, tritium, and uranium.
Wow.
I was a non-compete offer to do that. So I have my own vision. I think that's part of the problem with the other two candidates. They don't really know what they think. That's the reason they're so low energy about things, is they're relying on someone else to tell them what to think. I think I've got a vision for Tennessee.
Okay, well, I have been told that we were in overtime, and that was easy to do. But just lastly, telling Shelby Countyans and West Tennesseans why you deserve their vote.
I would very much appreciate your votes. I'm going to say to all you Shelby Countyans and West Tennesseans, I love you. I love you whether you vote for me or not, because we are countrymen. We are Tennessee volunteers in the truest sense. And I will ask for your vote, and I will ask for your prayers and your support if we do indeed win this, like I think we're going to, that we work to make Tennessee good for all Tennesseans, and so that my children, their children, and their children someday can grow old and free like I have in our great state.
Okay, well said. Well, thank you so much for the time. And be sure to follow us for all political coverage. August 6th is the state primary, and where you could vote for Monty Fritts out of the primary. And then November election, you will decide on a new Tennessee governor. But please follow ABC24 for all of it. We will keep you informed. Thank you for watching.